Jingyuan's banner is out, and to whoever managed to get him, congratulations to you. For the rest of us, I'm sure that the 4 stars on the banner would have to suffice. But don't be discouraged, as a lot of people have actually talked about how good this banner is, especially because of the 4 stars. So if you threw in 20 or 30 tickets and got one of these 3 characters, or maybe even all 3 of them, then your account is better off than when you started. However, resource in this game is rather limited, and you can't really level all 3 of them right now unless you want to swipe that card. So of these 3 characters, who's the best one to build first? Before we talk about that, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's first talk about what each of these characters can do, starting with Sushang. Sushang is a physical hunt character and excels at doing a lot of damage, especially when the enemy toughness bar is depleted. Her skill basically deals physical damage and has a 33% chance to trigger sword stance. All that means is that after the damage from the skill itself, there's a 1 in 3 chance that another instance of damage triggers, doing damage based on Sushang's attack. If the enemy is weakness broken, then this effect will be guaranteed to trigger. On top of that, for every enemy that is weakness broken, Sushang also gets a speed buff for 2 turns, making her go really fast. Her ult is also quite straightforward. It summons a giant chicken that slams its backside onto the enemy, dealing physical damage. I don't know how this works in terms of the lore, but it is what it is. What's good about this ult is that it gives her 3 separate buffs. Firstly, it advances her actions by 100%, meaning right after she ults, Sushang can immediately attack again, making her sort of like a mini Scylla. Second, it buffs her attack by a certain percentage. And third, it gives her 2 extra chances to trigger sword stance for 2 turns. This means that in an ideal situation where the enemy is weakness broken and it's Sushang's turn, she can use her skill, ultimate, and then use a skill again. On that second use of her skill, she can do up to 2 to 3 follow-up attacks simultaneously after the damage of the skill itself. This combo adds up to be a lot, especially if the enemy is weak against physical. Her performance can vary though from one extreme to another, depending on if you can break the enemy weakness. If you can't, she doesn't do a tremendous amount of damage, but if you can, she will snowball to deal insane amounts of damage. Next up is Tingyun. Now Tingyun is functionally a buffer. If you didn't get lucky and missed out on Bronya, Tingyun is an excellent alternative to have. On top of that, she has one of the bushiest tails in all of Hoyoverse. I'm not sure what that contributes to this video, but I still want to point it out either way. Tingyun's skill buffs the target's attack based on an upper limit determined by Tingyun's own attack stat. The easy way to understand this is that it buffs attack. The difficult way is the higher her attack is, the higher the buff on the target. In addition, whenever the buff target attacks, they deal an additional instance of lightning damage, but this can only trigger once. Tingyun also does additional damage based on the attack of the target that she has buffed. So essentially, everyone just does more damage whenever she buffs someone. The buff only works on one character though, so you can't buff your entire team with it, otherwise they'll just be broken. Speaking of broken, let's talk about her ultimate, which is slightly easier to understand. All it does is give 50 energy to a single ally and buff their damage by a certain percentage. Tingyun is the only character right now that can give energy to other characters. When used correctly, this ult can allow characters like Sushang to use her ultimate much earlier and snowball continuously. It can also help in a tight pinch if you really need your healer to cast their heal ultimates, so Tingyun's ult is super useful in almost any situation. Now the last character is March 7th. Since she is a free character, let me just briefly talk about her eidolons since that's what you'll be getting anyways. The noteworthy ones are E2 and E6 for shielding and E1 and E4 for offensive purposes. E2 lets March provide 1 shield to an ally before the fight starts, and E6 allows her to basically heal whoever she shields. E1 gives her more energy whenever she freezes something, which is quite often with her ult, and E4 allows her to counter up to 3 times in a turn, which does add up. So that's basically what each of these characters can do. Going back to the original question, who should you build first? Well, this largely depends on your current needs. If you lack a reliable buffer, then obviously Tingyun will be the best choice here. Most team compositions right now focus on one main DPS and the rest being supports, so Tingyun essentially enables this style of play by being a buffer for your main DPS. If you lack a DPS, then Sushang might be able to solve your problems. Physical weakness breaks are one of the highest damage multipliers in the game, and with her back-to-back attacks, Sushang can be quite a reliable DPS character for your team. Just be warned though that if you can't break the enemy's weakness, she doesn't perform as well as you might expect, otherwise she's still pretty strong. For March, I think you should only build her if you need a reliable shielder and crowd controller. The more eidolons you have of her though, the better she becomes. If you somehow lucked out, or maybe unluckily got her E6, depending on how you look at it, building her as a shielder that can freeze every few turns lets you control the fight a lot better and ensures that your team can survive because of her shield. She's also good with Clara and other tanks like Japard or the fire main character, as her shield can draw aggro. So to reiterate, in general, I would suggest Tingyun should be your first choice, as no matter what team you put her in, she's gonna provide added benefit, especially if you already have some DPS built up. If you don't have a good DPS build, then Sushang might be a better choice. Finally, you can build March if you have some of her eidolons, and especially if you have Clara, who she works really well with. Again, this is very subjective, and as I mentioned, largely depends on the team you have and your current needs. So don't just build them without figuring out how they can be useful to you first. I hope this helps you out if you had trouble deciding on who to build or prioritize, and don't be discouraged if you couldn't get Jingyuan. There's plenty of crazy strong characters coming just around the corner. Now, before I end this video, just keep in mind these are just suggestions, they are not hard and fast rules. If you want to build a specific character, whether it's a DPS or support, then it's really up to you. Just play the game whichever way that gives you the most amount of fun. That does it for this video. If it has been helpful to you in some way, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. As usual, have a nice day.